Hello, I'm Super Orange Cat here, and today to cover Toonami's ratings from May 16th, 2020. Let's start at the top of the block. At the top of the block, we have My Hero Academia at a .20, Paranoia Agent at a .15, Mob Psycho 100 at a .16, Black Clover at a .16, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind at a .14, and Naruto Shippuden at a .13. Overall, this statistically might be the worst week in Toonami history. And you might be like, oh, that's hyperbolic. It's not the worst of all time. Well, I checked, and My Hero Academia ties the lowest ever lead in Toonami history ratings-wise with a .20, with another My Hero Academia episode from about a couple months ago, and with an episode of Dragon Ball Super back in 2018. And, and the question is, what caused this? Because last week we had a rerun at the start of the block, a rerun of an episode of My Hero Academia, and that pulled in a .29. So you would think a new episode would pull in at least a .3 or something amazing, but that does not appear to be the case here. And there's many different theories looking into why this happened this way. Like, for example, you look at what else was on TV that night. The most notable thing was that UFC did have a night of fighting, and there has been some historical tendency that, especially if there's like a bigger card out on Saturday nights with UFC, that sometimes that pulls away viewers from Toonami. However, according to Showbiz Daily, not wrestling, the UFC, the MMA ended around 11:50ish, which was before Toonami. So that doesn't really explain it. If you look at other stuff that was on that night, something out of the ordinary, there was like the graduation together special with President Obama. And you think, oh, that's a draw. And it did draw overall good ratings. However, that was hours before Toonami, so I don't think that had any impact at all. And this is just sad. And I think one theory I've seen passed around, which more I think about is probably the most plausible theory, is that, well, if you were tuning in last week, you saw a rerun of My Hero Academia, so maybe you just assumed this week was a rerun, like the season was over. And it isn't, although there's a lot of asterisks to that right there. And there's another thing I want to mention about My Hero Academia in a moment or two. I just want to go over some other shows first. Paranoia Agent drops a 10th. I can't recall, barring very bizarrely special circumstances, that a show in the same slot dropped at least a 10th in the ratings week to week. That's just impressive. And this almost comes closer to the ratings it was getting before. The first couple episodes were a disappointment in the ratings. Third episode did really well, probably because of the carryover of the episode of My Hero Academia doing pretty well. But I think this is more down to norm for Paranoia Agent. It's more or less turning into a big flop at 12:30. Then you have the second episode of Mob Psycho 100. Note, this is not season 2. This is still the first season we're getting here. Actually building on Paranoia Agent a bit, which does show there is something of a group of people, something of a fan base that is stuck to watching Mob Psycho 100 on Toonami, even though this is a rerun of something that originally aired nearly 2 years ago. Yeah, it aired nearly 2 years ago. At least the dub became available about 2 years ago, I believe. So, there's still some audience for that, and it built. And they have Black Clover almost holding exactly what Mob Psycho did in terms of overall numbers. So, all things considered, you got to say it's a pretty good night for Black Clover. Oh, yeah, and by the way, Black Clover should totally be pushed up to the start of the block, but Tommy's never going to do that, so why even bother talking about it that much? Then you have JoJo at a .14. I only dropped 2 hundredths. And at the same time, considering how it is a niche show, and like I mentioned, the fan base is loud, but overall kind of small in number. .14 isn't horrendous. And the same can be said with Shippuden at a .13 at the end of the block. Toonami's just there simply to fill up space, so I don't think they're really ever looking at Shippuden's ratings and really saying anything about it. But overall, just a pretty horrendous week for Toonami. Statistically, it has to be close to one of the worst of all time, which is incredible considering that because of the current situation in the world right now, in theory, the ratings should be higher because outside of that UFC event, there were no live sports. A lot of people are still just more or less stuck at home. And what else are you going to do but watch TV? And a lot of people, that's what they're going to do. And you can talk about, well, what about streaming? Well, you got to imagine, even with the number of people that are still at home watching stuff, even if they like prefer streaming, there's gonna be something of a trickle down effect where some people will be watching cable when they usually wouldn't. So nonetheless, still a disappointment. And I just want to go into a bit of alleged My Hero Academia news. There's nothing official about it, so I was kind of on the edge of even mentioning it here. Someone, I believe on our Toonami, pointed out that the current schedule for Adult Swim for this upcoming Saturday mentions that the episode of My Hero Academia that'll air is episode 84. As a bit of a bearings to where we were, that's 3 episodes ago. That was the first episode of the fight between Deku and Gentle Criminal and La Brava. So just kind of a bearings there. And some people theorize, and pretty good theory I'll admit here, is that they believe that Funimation already told Toonami it's gonna take a little while, at least probably 3 weeks, because considering they're buffering themselves 3 weeks of reruns here to get episode 87 finished. There's no word from Funimation yet about that episode, but again, that's if this is true and this wasn't just like a scheduling issue, then that's pretty bad news from Toonami because you can more or less come to expect these ratings for certain the next few weeks if that is true. And again, Toonami, after 1 week of reprieve, looking like maybe they're in a good position after all. They're kind of back in an ugly position again. I mean, you have My Hero Academia, which is gonna be in a brief rerun cycle. You have Paranoia Agent, which is a rerun that's already flopping. Mob Psycho, another rerun, which admittedly is not flopping as much as I thought it would. And then you have Black Clover, who Toonami's never going to give the time of day to. JoJo, which has a niche fan base. And Shippuden, which I think is just kind of on autopilot mode at the end of the block at this point. Toonami doesn't have much right now. And it's just really sad to see here. But what do you guys think? What's your opinions on Toonami's lineup now? What's your favorite show on the block? What do you think the situation is with My Hero Academia? Leave your comments, leave your opinions, leave your guesses down below. I love reading them. If you want this content, if you want more Toonami or anime content like this, please like, please comment, and please subscribe. I am Super Orange Cat, and that is all.